I am delighted to be with you virtually, and I want to say hello to all of my friends in Finland. I miss you, and I hope that the next time we have an opportunity, I'm there in person to be part of the work that you're doing on teacher education. I must say that I've been asked to speak about the most important aspects of teacher education, and it's odd for me to be doing this to people who already know so much about the most important aspects of teacher education. We have a saying in the United States that when you offer advice to someone who already knows just about everything, it's like taking coals to Newcastle, Newcastle being a place that produces coal and doesn't need very much more. But having said that, while I feel like I'm carrying coals to Newcastle, I'm glad to say a few things about what I think is the most important aspect of teacher education and what I know is already both going on in Finland and that you're working to deepen and strengthen in your work. So I want to say, first of all, that the context right now is challenging in many ways for all of us all around the world. Both the changes to the nature of knowledge and the speed with which knowledge is expanding, the changes in technology, the way in which our world works are really redefining the way we think about knowledge. And I think that's one key piece of what is important for us to take account of in teacher education. As many of you know, I spent many years at Stanford University. Across the bay is another university called the University of California at Berkeley. They are our major rivals. So I don't usually like to quote them, but there are a couple of professors there who've been doing something very important, which is tracking the growth of new knowledge in the world. They found out that between 1999 and 2003, there was more new knowledge created in the world than in the entire history of the world preceding. So knowledge is now growing exponentially. The last time I checked, technology knowledge is doubling every 11 months. It's probably faster than that now. And what that means is that when we think about what do schools need to communicate to children and what do teachers need to help children learn, it's very different from the olden days where the idea was there was a set of literacy skills and some numeracy facts and a few other things you needed to know. You could kind of lay it out there over the 12 years of schooling and divide it up and make sure kids learned it, and then they'd be ready to go out in the world and take up whatever their work would be. Now we're really preparing young people for knowledge that hasn't been discovered yet, using technologies that haven't been invented yet, solving major problems that we have not managed to solve that are going to require really rapid and intense solutions. Climate change, access to food and water, the effects of natural disasters, the need for conflict resolution around the world. So young people have to be able not only to know some things, they've got to understand sort of the structure of knowledge in different domains, but mostly how to get new knowledge and combine it, create solutions, test out their solutions and ideas with others, collaborate in solving problems. This means that there are going to be new pedagogies to be invented that allow young people to learn, if you will, to be very metacognitive about their learning, to be able to be initiators of knowledge production, not just consumers of knowledge. And that's something that teacher education has to take into account. And because everyone is a little older by the time they get to be a teacher than they were as a kid, the way in which they learn will have changed by the time they become a teacher. And I'll come back to that problem of how do we learn to teach things that we didn't ourselves experience. The second piece of what I think is a major change around the world is that people are migrating for many reasons. Diversity is greater in every country. Language diversity, cultural diversity, the diversity of learning styles and differences. Finland is experiencing that, as are other countries. And being able to really teach diverse learners in ways that are supportive of their approach to learning, their experiences, that's culturally competent and cognizant, is really a big piece of teacher education today. And these are areas where I think the Finnish system has already made great advances, but I'm sure there are areas where you're also continuing to do work. The last piece I would mention around that is that, a lot of young people in today's turbulent, chaotic world, with refugees, with natural disasters, with war-torn countries, have a lot of trauma and adverse conditions that they've experienced. And supporting them in their learning and development is actually a very important and sophisticated set of skills that teachers need to have. So I'm going to talk for just a moment about the content of the teacher education that's implied by these changes, but also then a little bit about the process of preparation for teachers. In terms of the content, one of the things that undergirds this kind of teaching is an understanding of the science of learning and development. We've learned a lot recently about how the brain functions, about how neural pathways are developed, about how learning occurs, and this is important knowledge for teachers. In Finland, where you are so well grounded in research, both as part of what teachers learn and then what they learn how to do, this new science of learning and development is going to be very fundamental, is already fundamental to what you're doing. Among the interesting things that I often talk about in the United States is that some of the Finnish schools that I've seen are very well designed to take advantage of what we know about how the brain develops. So for example, we know that relationships are extremely important. Secure attachments and relationships not only make babies and young children feel good, they actually support the development of neural pathways in the brain. When a mother and child, or a father and child, or a teacher and pupil relate, are interactive, hug each other, there are neural pathways developed, oxytocin is communicated hormonally that affects the development of the brain architecture. So relationships are really a fundamental piece of what schools have to be designed to support and what teachers need to be able to develop. Secondly is the fact that the brain develops around the learning of symbol systems. Turns out that it's not just the kind of vocabulary we hear or the kind of experiences we have that develop learning, but it's the interaction. It's the fact that we interact with each other. It's the fact that symbol systems create different pathways. So learning foreign languages, music, and arts are all symbol systems that develop greater neural pathways and flexibility in the brain. And I'm remembering how important it is in Finland for children at a very young age to begin to learn multiple languages. In one school I was in, it was Finnish and Arabic and Russian and English and Somali, and all of those have different alphabetic structures as well as symbol systems, and kids are picking this up in a variety of ways. Music is so important in your schooling system, another symbol system that develops the brain, as well as the arts. And then physical fitness. I still remember the kids getting their snowshoes and snowsuits on every hour to go outside and be physically active. And that actually promotes learning. So many of the practices that teachers are already learning to cultivate are actually what we're learning develops the capacity of the brain to learn. And that's going to be very, very important to continue to develop. How people develop social and emotional skills as well as cognitive skills is also a big piece of this, that it turns out, as you know, that being able to interact, to intrapersonally be aware, to interpersonally interact, to collaborate, to be a conflict resolver, to be able to be resilient and persevering in the face of obstacles. All of these social and emotional skills and habits and mindsets are very predictive of how well people do in life as well as in school. So the development of these abilities on the part of teachers is an important piece of teacher education. Understanding this new conception of knowledge that I described is something that's very important, and in the new curriculum in Finland, the attention to interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary conceptions of knowledge for problem solving and for deeper understanding is baked in, helping teachers learn how to teach in ways that both raise up the structure of the discipline and the modes of inquiry in the discipline, but also allow people to learn to integrate knowledge in new ways and for new purposes is going to be very important. And then finally, understanding the importance of identity and identity development for young people. Who they see themselves as being actually drives their motivation to learn, their engagement in learning, their feelings about whether they can learn, and therefore whether they will take on challenges, and whether they will persevere when they confront obstacles, whether they have that kind of a growth mindset. And that's going to be very important for kids who've experienced any kind of trauma or discrimination or bias, being in an identity-safe environment where they can learn to see themselves as supported and competent is as important as the academic work that goes on. So these are all important in teacher education, and then how we learn those is another challenge, because coming to be a teacher, which is a very complex profession, is not an easy thing. We often identify sort of three challenges to the learning process. One is the apprenticeship of observation, that you've been a student for 12 years, you've watched teachers teach, you think you know what they do, and then you often have to learn and unlearn some of what you inferred from being a student. When we go to a concert, we see a composer waving his or her arms, and we say, oh, that's easy, I could do that. When you're a student and you watch a teacher, you often have the same experience. And sometimes that means that you're drawing the wrong lessons from what looks like a really easy task, handing out papers, asking questions, all of the thinking and the strategy that goes behind that has to be learned in a new way as a prospective teacher. A second challenge is the challenge of enactment. It's not enough to know the theory. It's not enough to read the books. It's not enough to know what you might do or should do. You have to be able to actually do it in practice, which is much more complicated. And because teaching is complex, the third challenge, you have to be able to do that with 20 students in a room, all of whom have different needs, and you're pursuing different goals, and you're trying to be sure that many things are getting accomplished at once and many needs are being met at once. So to really attack these challenges of the apprenticeship of observation, enacting what you know in theory and doing it in a complex environment, the clinical experience is so important in teacher education, and having the right kind of guidance in that clinical experience, seeing the right kind of exemplars and models, having the right kind of conversations with very thoughtful mentors, cooperating teachers, supervisors. All of that is really supported by the Finnish approach to the teaching schools, to the model schools that are attached to the universities and the partner schools, and the extraordinary mentors that you have in the faculty in both the university and the school, and the way that they work together. So the Finnish strategy has been one that's been extremely important for many people around the world to learn from. It's clearly fundamental and will continue to be even more so with these new challenges for teacher education. It's very important as we develop teacher education in our own contexts and as we collectively share across the world what we're learning, that we figure out both how to create the very most educative clinical contexts and experiences, develop the most thoughtful kinds of mentoring and support, and help teachers become researchers on their own, as I know is part of the agenda that you take up. Teachers have to be continually solving problems of practice. There are no easy problems. There are always new ones, new kids, new issues, new ideas, and that research sensibility is really critical for teachers and for teacher education to develop. So I just want to wish you continued insights and adventures in the development of the system that you already have. We learn so much from you. We know that teaching is the profession on which all other professions depend, and that for that reason, teacher education is a sort of sacred trust, that what we as teacher educators can do to support teachers in taking up the knowledge and the skills that they want to have to serve students well is some of the most important work in our society. There's a saying that in the United States we've tried to get past, which was the old saying that those who can do and those who can't teach. We really want to evolve that saying in the way that I think you have already begun to do, that those who can do and those who understand teach. And furthermore, that those who can teach and those who can't go into a less significant line of work. Good luck on your mission in this conference, and I hope to see you soon.